My name is Elise, and I live with my parents in a quiet town near the hills. My family owns a large house, and most people think we live a perfect life. My father runs a business, and my mother often helps him. We are not rich like the people in the big cities, but we are known in our area. People respect my father and see him as an important man. Growing up, I had everything I needed. I went to good schools and traveled when I could. But the one thing I never had was freedom. I had just returned from university. I was supposed to be there for the full year, but things didn't go well. I told my parents I needed a break. They didn't ask too many questions. They were proud I was studying in the capital, and they didn't want to talk about problems. The truth was, I had failed some of my exams. I felt lost and embarrassed. Coming home felt safe, even if it also made me feel like I had given up. At home, things were quiet. My parents were busy, and I spent most days alone. I stayed in my room or sat in the garden with a book I didn't really read. I didn't feel like myself. I felt like someone who had disappointed everyone, even if no one said it out loud. Then one afternoon, something small happened that changed everything. It was cold that day, and the sky was gray. I had a bad headache and stayed in bed for most of the morning. Around noon, my mother knocked on my door and told me that Luca had brought fresh vegetables. I didn't know who Luca was. She said, "He's the new driver. He also picks up supplies from the market." I nodded and stayed in bed. Later that evening, I went down to the kitchen to get some tea. There was a bowl on the counter. I looked inside. It was soup. Next to it, there was a small note. It said, "For Miss Elise. You looked pale today. This might help." I held the note in my hand for a long time. I wasn't used to people noticing me like that. I wasn't used to small kindness. The next day, I asked my mother about the soup. She smiled and said, "Luca makes his own food while he waits in the car. He leaves some for us sometimes." I didn't say anything else, but I remembered the note. It was not something my mother asked for. It was something he chose to do. That evening, when I walked past the driveway, I saw him sitting quietly with a book in his hand. He looked up and gave me a small nod. I smiled and kept walking. Days passed. I saw Luca a few more times. Sometimes he was in the kitchen helping with boxes. Sometimes he was outside cleaning the car. He never said much, but each time we crossed paths, he gave me a gentle smile, like he was saying hello without using words. I began to notice his calmness. He was never in a rush. He didn't try to talk too much, but he was always polite and respectful. It made me feel comfortable around him. One afternoon, I sat in the garden reading. It had rained earlier, and the grass was still wet. I saw Luca walk past with a box of tools. He paused and looked at the garden fence. One of the wooden boards had come loose. He walked over and began to fix it, even though no one had asked him to. I watched from my chair. He didn't see me at first. When he did, he looked a little shy. "Thank you," I said. It was the first time I spoke to him properly. He nodded. It was loose. Could have fallen. I smiled. You always fix things. He looked at me and then said, Some things need care, even if no one notices them. I didn't know why those words stayed in my mind, but they did. After that, I started talking to him more. Just small things. I asked him where he was from. He told me he grew up in a town 2 hours away. I asked if he had family. He said he had a younger sister he was helping through school. Each time we spoke, I felt something inside me become lighter. He didn't know anything about my failed exams or my quiet sadness. With him, I didn't feel like someone who had failed. I felt like a person again. One morning, I saw him talking to the gardener near the back wall. They were laughing. I couldn't remember the last time I laughed like that. I walked past them slowly. When he saw me, he stood straight and gave a small wave. I waved back. Later that evening, I found another note next to the soup bowl. Hope today felt a little better. Try the pumpkin one. It's my mother's recipe. I laughed quietly. Not because it was funny, but because someone had taken the time to care. It had been a long time since anyone did that. I started leaving small notes too. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I liked writing to him. The soup was perfect. Your mother must be proud. Or, I'm reading a book you might like. It's quiet, but deep. He never said much in return, but his notes became a little longer. Once he wrote, Thank you for the kind words. Most people don't see drivers. You do. I didn't know what to say to that. It made my heart ache in a way I didn't expect. My mother noticed that I was spending more time outside. She was happy to see me looking brighter. She didn't know why. I didn't tell her. I wasn't ready. I didn't even know what I was feeling. All I knew was that I started waiting for the quiet hum of the car in the driveway. I started listening for his steps in the kitchen. I didn't know if that meant I was falling in love, but it felt like something close. One evening, after dinner, I went outside to breathe. The stars were out, and the air was cool. I stood near the gate, looking up at the sky. I didn't hear him walk up behind me. It's a clear night, he said. I turned and nodded. I haven't looked at the stars in a while. He looked. Up! Sometimes we forget what's above us. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said softly, I'm glad you're here, Luca. He looked surprised. Thank you, Miss Elise. I shook my head. You don't have to call me that. He smiled. It's habit. But, okay. Something passed between us in that moment. A quiet truth. Neither of us said what we were really thinking, but we didn't need to. And from that moment on, things began to change. Before I share the rest of my story, I need to know, where are you listening from? Knowing someone hears me, understands me, gives me strength. After that night under the stars, something inside me felt different. The house looked the same. The rooms, The garden, even the hallway where I always left my shoes, it was all unchanged. But the way I moved through it wasn't the same. I felt like I was waiting for something, or maybe someone. I started noticing Luca in ways I hadn't before. I noticed how he always stood with his back straight and his eyes lowered, as if showing respect without needing to be told. I noticed that he never rushed, not even when it rained or when my father shouted from the driveway for the car. He always took his time, not to be slow, but to be careful. I wondered what it would feel like to have that kind of quiet in your heart. We still didn't talk much when others were around, but I found small ways to connect. Once, I left a book on the bench in the garden with a small piece of paper tucked inside. It's slow, but lovely. Maybe you'll enjoy it. The next day, the book was gone, and in its place was an apple, bright green, the kind I liked. He didn't leave a note, but I knew it was from him. I found myself doing small things too. When I baked cookies with my mother, I saved 2 in a paper napkin and left them near the back door. The napkin was always gone by evening. It felt like a secret friendship. Or maybe it was something more, even if I didn't have the words for it yet. Then one afternoon, my cousin Ava came to visit. She was full of energy and questions. She had been traveling, and every sentence started with, "When I was in Paris," or, "In Rome, the coffee is stronger." I smiled and listened. I needed her voice, loud and full of life, to shake up the quiet I had been living in. We walked in the garden, and she looked around with interest. "It's pretty here," she said. "Simple, but peaceful." I nodded. Then she stopped near the bench. "You've been sitting here a lot?" "Sometimes," I replied. She raised an eyebrow. "Alone?" I didn't answer right away. Later that day, she saw Luca unloading vegetables from the car. He was wearing his usual plain jacket and had dust on his shoes. She watched him for a long second, then looked back at me with a smile that made my face warm. "Oh," she said, "so that's the reason you've been so quiet lately." "It's not like that," I said too quickly. "Isn't it?" I didn't reply, but I knew she saw the truth in my eyes. That night at dinner, I barely ate. My parents were discussing a new business project, but their words passed over me like wind. My mind was far away, in the garden, near the bench, with the memory of the green apple and a man who barely spoke, but somehow said everything. The next morning, I left a short note for Luca in the kitchen. "Can we talk this evening? Garden. 6 o'clock. I waited all day. I read the same page of a book 3 times. I brushed my hair twice before going outside. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I knew I couldn't keep walking around with this storm of feelings inside me. When I reached the garden, he was already there. He was holding the book I'd given him before. He looked nervous. I sat beside him. For a long time we didn't speak. Then I said, "I think I've been hiding." He looked at me gently. "From what?" "From everything. From myself. From how I feel when I'm near you." He didn't say anything. He waited the way he always did, with patience, not pressure. I turned toward him. You make things feel easy, like I can be myself. He gave a small smile. You make me feel noticed. We sat quietly again. My heart was loud in my chest. There's a problem, though, I said softly. I know, he said. My parents. He nodded. They won't approve. They think I belong to a different world. He looked down at the grass. They're not wrong. They are, I said quickly. Or they will be. One day. He met my eyes. I don't want to hurt you. You're not. You won't. His hand brushed mine for just a second. It wasn't much, but it was everything. The following days felt like walking on glass. Every small smile, every shared glance held meaning, but also fear. I didn't want my parents to find out too soon, but I also didn't want to keep pretending that nothing was happening. Something was, and it mattered. Then, one morning, my mother found a note meant for me. It was next to a small jar of jam Luca had made. The note read, "Try this with warm bread. It's sweet, like you, but not too much." I saw her reading it. Her face changed. She didn't say anything during breakfast, but I felt her eyes watching me. After breakfast, she called me into the sitting room. "Elise," she began, "I want to ask you something." I waited. "Are you involved with Luca?" I looked down at my hands. "We talk." "Talk," she repeated. "Do you like him?" I nodded. She stood very still. Then she said, "You do understand this isn't right?" "No," I said. "I don't understand. He's kind. He's honest. And he makes me feel like I'm worth something. He's the driver." "He's a person," I replied, louder than I expected. She sighed. "Your father can't know. Not yet." That evening, I walked into my father's office before I could change my mind. "I need to talk to you," I said. He put down his paper and looked up. "What's on your mind?" I told him everything. About the notes, the garden, the way Luca looked at me like I was someone worth listening to. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, I waited for his anger, but it didn't come. Instead, he asked, "Do you trust him?" "Yes." "Do you believe he respects you?" "I know he does." He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "I want to meet him. Properly." I felt my breath return. The next day, Luca was called into my father's office. I wasn't there, but I stood at the top of the stairs the whole time. When he came out, he didn't look afraid, just thoughtful. "We talked," he said. He wasn't angry. That night, I sat by my window and looked at the stars. I thought about how far we had come, from small notes to quiet talks, from fear to honesty. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if love would be enough to carry us through the judgment of others. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the answer, because whatever happened, I knew I had already changed, and I wasn't going back. After my father spoke with Luca, something in the house began to shift. It was not a loud change, but a slow and quiet one. My father still read his newspaper every morning. My mother still arranged the flowers in the living room. But their silence around the topic said more than words. No one told me to stop seeing Luca, but no one encouraged it either. I saw Luca less often during the day. He seemed to keep a little more distance, maybe out of respect, or maybe because he didn't want to cause trouble. But I still felt his presence everywhere. When I walked through the garden, I looked for signs that he had been there. A trimmed bush, a pile of cleaned leaves, or a small stone moved near the bench. I missed the notes. I missed his quiet words. Then, one rainy morning, I found something tucked under the kitchen towel next to the breadbasket. It was a folded piece of paper. My heart beat faster as I opened it. I miss the quiet with you. The world is louder without it. It was written in his careful handwriting. I smiled, and for the first time in days, I felt light again. That afternoon, I waited for him near the back steps. When he walked by with a box of oranges, I called his name. He looked surprised, but then his eyes softened. "You left a note," I said. "I wasn't sure if I should." "I'm glad you did." We sat on the steps for a while. The rain had stopped, but the air was still damp. I looked at him and asked, "Do you still want this? Whatever this is between us?" He nodded. "I always have, but I also want to protect you." I touched his hand. "Then stay, and let's try. Even if it's not easy." He looked at me, and in that moment, I knew. Whatever happened next, we were in it together. Time passed, and slowly, my parents adjusted. My father watched quietly, never saying much, but he didn't stop me from seeing Luca. My mother stayed distant, but I saw her watching us one evening from the window. She didn't smile, but she also didn't turn away. It wasn't easy. Some people in town talked. I heard whispers when I went to the market. A few friends stopped calling, but I didn't care. I had never felt more sure of myself than I did with Luca. He didn't try to impress me. He didn't make big promises, but he was always there. Steady, kind, and true. One evening we sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was painted with soft orange and gold. I leaned my head against his shoulder. "You know," I said, "I never thought I'd fall in love with someone like you." He looked down at me. "Someone like me?" "I mean someone so quiet, so steady. You don't push. You wait." He smiled. "Sometimes the best things grow in silence." I laughed gently. "I guess I needed someone like that." We didn't talk about the future often. It felt too big. But one evening Luca asked, "Do you ever think about leaving this town?" I thought for a moment. "I used to. I wanted to run away after my university problems. I thought leaving would fix everything. And now? Now, I think I want to stay. But only if it feels like a place where I can breathe. He nodded. Maybe we make it that kind of place. One Sunday afternoon, my father invited Luca to have tea with us on the veranda. It was quiet at first. My mother poured tea and said very little. My father asked about Luca's family, his sister, his job before coming here. Luca answered with calm respect. At the end of the tea, my father said, "You're a good man, Luca. That's clear. My daughter is strong. She needs someone who sees that." "I do, sir," Luca said softly. "I always have." It wasn't a blessing, but it wasn't rejection either. It was something in between. And sometimes, that's all you can ask for. Months passed. The garden turned from green to gold as autumn arrived. Luca and I spent more time together, walking, talking, sometimes just sitting side by side. He told me stories from his childhood. I shared things I had never told anyone, not even my closest friends. He made me feel seen. I made him feel heard. Then one crisp morning, I found a small box on the bench in the garden. Inside was a simple silver ring. No note, no big speech, just the ring. I turned around and saw him standing near the path. He looked nervous. I walked up to him and said, "Is this what I think it is?" He nodded. "I know we're different. I know it won't be easy. But I love you. And I want to build a life with you. If you'll have me." Tears filled my eyes. I didn't need to think. I already knew my answer. "Yes," I whispered. We didn't plan a big wedding. We didn't want one. We had a small ceremony in the garden, under the tree where we had once shared our first quiet conversation. My cousin Ava came. So did a few neighbors. My mother wore a soft blue dress and sat beside my father, who smiled more than I had ever seen him smile. After the vows, Luca held my hand and said, "You changed everything for me." I looked at him and replied, "You helped me find myself again." Years passed. We built a simple life. Luca continued to work with his hands, but now in a small business we started together. I taught English lessons to children in the village. We had 2 children, one with his calm eyes, the other with my curious smile. Sometimes, when the day grew quiet, I would sit in the garden and think about the girl I used to be, the one who returned home feeling lost, the one who didn't know what she wanted. I thought about how she found love in a man who never tried to win her with words, but simply showed up again and again. I still had that first note, the one with the soup. I kept it in a small box with dried petals and old photographs. And every time I read it, I smiled. Because love didn't arrive with fireworks or a loud voice. It came with warmth in a bowl, a soft apple, a quiet presence, and a kind man who changed my life just by being himself. If you liked my story, please like, comment, and share. More simple and emotional stories are coming soon.